Welcome to the Dome Discussions Podcast. Your top source for all things New Orleans Saints. Powered by four voices who live and breathe black and gold. Touchdown! Every hit, every play.
Welcome to the NFL.
Every moment. We've got it covered.
Let's go! Let's go! Go!
What's going on, Who Dat Nation? Appreciate everybody tuning in to the Dome Discussions Podcast, part of the Be in the Know Network. I'm Kyle Besson with the Athlon Sports and Canal Street Chronicles.
I'm Nick Jennings with Canal Street Chronicles.
I'm Caleb Yacarino with Canal Street Chronicles.
I'm Drew Collins with Who Dat Dish.
All right, and to start off today, we kind of want to talk about TJ Watt. TJ Watt, the 2021 Defensive Player of the Year, had 22.5 sacks, which tied the NFL record in just 14 games. Is currently having some contract problems with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Nick, I know you have a lot that you want to talk about this and how it could connect him to the Saints. So go ahead and start us off.
Yeah, so obviously when a player of his stature hits the trade block, or I wouldn't say the trade block because the Steelers have no intent of getting rid of him, but when there's a holdout of this level, obviously you're going to get connected to him. And look, while the Saints do have money right now, this whole situation is because he wants the big bucks. And like I said, while they may be able to do it, he's 30 years old and he's going to want a long-term contract to feel secure. So I just don't know if that's in the best interest of the team's future. There's no telling when that decline starts being 30 years old. He just had a torn pec a couple of years ago. So I don't agree with giving up future assets, likely at a hefty price as well, for a year or two of high production on a team that's nowhere near contenders right now. And look, even if it is a couple of years, like I said, this team is nowhere near contenders right now. And if New Orleans does become a contender at some point soon and are just one piece away, a deal like that could really come back to bite them. But I also do think this new defensive scheme will benefit guys like Isaiah Foskey, who has yet to get his feet under him in the big leagues. 26.5 sacks at Notre Dame, all-time leader. That means something to me still. So I haven't given up on him quite yet. I think him being a stand-up edge rusher in this new defense could really benefit him, as well as 7th-round draft pick Fadil Diggs. So I'm not as down on the defensive edge group as a lot are, and I just don't know if a potential TJ Watt trade would be worth it for the Saints.
Yeah, I'm on the other side of this conversation. I think trading for TJ Watt would be a great decision, in my opinion. I definitely agree with the age thing and the injury issues and how expensive it's going to be for just the trade, but you also have to pay the player. That's a lot to begin with. But I just think I'm lower on the edge rush group, so that might be the difference here, and that might be why I feel like it's something that if it was ever going to happen, I'd be for it. But TJ Watt is one of the best run defenders in the game, but he's also one of the most productive edge rushers in the game. And having a combination like that, people always say, oh, if you have, what's the quarterback on the defensive side of the ball? It's edge rusher. It's having a dominant edge rusher. It changes everything. It makes the pass defense better. It makes the run defense better. It makes the sack production better. So it's one of those things that completely changes an outlook for a defense. And honestly, if the Steelers haven't had TJ Watt for all these years, I don't know if they would have had this good of a defense and this consistent of a defense. So I think trading for a player like TJ Watt is a good idea in general. Now, if the conversation does go to age, Micah Parsons is by far my choice. It was someone I talked about all offseason when he's still having his contract dispute with the Cowboys. Age, Kellen Moore had to go in practice against him every day. It just seems like that he's the perfect player with age, price, long-term potential. But with TJ Watt, I also just think it's a good idea.
I get what you're saying, but I think I'm on Nick's side for this. Obviously, outstanding player. We've been over that. He would 100% help the team. I just don't think the Saints are in any sort of spot right now to be able to afford and be able to kind of warrant trading so much future capital, spending so much cash on TJ Watt.
Yeah, and look, I think we're in all agreement here that TJ Watt would immediately bolster up the Saints' defensive line, sack production. I think this would be a great move in terms of the production. I think he would still produce for the Saints. But yeah, I do agree. You got to look at his trade value, his market price, how much you're going to have to pay him, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense for the Saints right now. You're rebuilding, and even if Tyler Shuck, we're going to imagine it's Tyler Shuck here, does become that quarterback, and then your window opens, you're still going to be giving up a lot, and you can really bolster up your team with a lot more additions than with the draft capital that you're going to be giving up and the market price that you're going to be up. The Saints do have a little bit of money right now. I just don't think it's smart to go and put it to TJ Watt, considering you also just recently paid Chase Young. Carl Granderson is still someone that you're hoping could blossom into a piece for you. I just don't see TJ Watt's move working out for the Saints and becoming somebody that they should look to add. And to be fair, the Steelers here still haven't said they want to trade him either.
Yeah, this is all potential. And the NFL just, being devil's advocate against myself, the NFL did just see with Joey Bosa, such a productive player, and then deal with injuries and has completely hit a roadblock and is not the same edge rusher as he was. So I definitely get both sides of the argument. I just think that TJ Watt is such a good player that I think he could be a JJ Watt type, just production, rest of his career, be there for just easy Hall of Fame production. So I would be fine with it, but I also see both sides.
And I think the fan in me more, like, if I see that notification the Saints are trading for TJ Watt, I'll be excited about it. I won't lie. Like, it's something that's exciting to see. It's just for the long-term growth of the team, you're giving up you're at least giving up a first-round pick. There's a first-round pick included in there. TJ Watt, even if he's 30 and coming off injury, TJ Watt is a valuable player who will produce, and he'll probably be worth that third-round pick. And then you're going to have to pay him. So it's just for the future of the team for me. I can't see the move working out for the Saints where he could have 20 sacks for the Saints, and I don't see that changing their win total to much more than 9, right? I can't. The Saints have a lot more holes everywhere else that I don't know how much TJ Watt impacts the team this year. And I mean, it might be, if it's a 2-year deal or something along those lines, it might be a way bigger deal and investing in themselves for next year. But for the upcoming season, I don't see it working out, and I don't know how long this deal would work for us.
And I think if this conversation was happening next year with a little bit more of a vision of how this team was looking with Tyler Shuck and everything and what are the needs, then maybe the views of this conversation could be a little bit different because in my opinion, I think going into the first round next year, it's going to be corner and edge rusher. And the history of the Saints drafting edge rusher recently hasn't been great. So that's one of those conversations then that would be like, oh, TJ Watt's available. They've been bad, or the Saints have not had a great time drafting edge rushers. Here's the perfect, I'd give away a first round pick for that. But that's also if the quarterback situation's better and there's not a lot of issues and those could be easily fixed. So I think the conversation would be better next year. Like if this was happening next year, I think this is from my perspective that all of us, I feel like, would be happier with that decision.
No, 100%. I agree. And next year is kind of a telling year for the Saints in a lot of seeing where Tyler Shuck or Spencer Rattler's at, who's your quarterback, how Kellen Moore is, and even Brandon Staley. So I think we do need a season of knowledge before the Saints pull a move like this, because doing something like this could hurt your future a lot more than I think it'd help. But with that being said, speaking of futures and futures on the team, we have a few players that we think would be surprising cuts for the Saints coming up in the season. There's a lot of guys that could be fan favorites, produced last year, who are just maybe aging or something like that, that the Saints may look to just move on from with a new coaching regimen. Nick, would you like to start us off with who you think would be the surprise cut this year?
For sure. For my surprise cut, I'm going to be looking at the D-tackle room in 2024 sixth-round pick Christian Boyd. Wasn't given much of an opportunity as a rookie with just 74 total defensive snaps, and he's entering a crowded position room with Brian Brzee, Colin Sanders, Nathan Shepard, John Ridgeway. Saints just traded for Devon Godshaw earlier this offseason and selected Vernon Broughton in the third round of this year's draft. However, the Saints don't really have a nose tackle set in stone, so that could be Boyd's path to the roster. Had 302 snaps at nose tackle during his final year at Northern Iowa in 2023. He has a lot of potential. If he is cut before roster cut downs, then I don't believe he would clear waivers. I would expect him to get picked up rather quickly. He's just 25 years old, but the room just may be too crowded to hold on to him.
And just quick thing on the nose tackle. Remember they traded for Devon Godshaw, so he's probably going to be the main nose tackle there. But as you said, Christian Boyd can also be that position. It was a kind of a conversation we had, I don't know if it was 2 podcasts ago or 3 podcasts ago when I was talking about the defensive tackle room. It's kind of a lot of names right now, and no one's stepping up. Christian Boyd is definitely a part of that group, and it was very annoying throughout the season last year where they just would not play Christian Boyd. When healthy, scratch, and it was just very upsetting because there's a lot of, I'm not going to say hype around Christian Boyd, but it felt like, the Saints finally got their nose tackle that they haven't had in so long, and he just never saw the field. So I agree, and it's just such a crowded room. So he's definitely someone I could see get cut.
Also made it more intriguing last year was coming out of college, he was such a good run defender. That was kind of what he did the best. And with how much the Saints struggled against the run last year, it was kind of confusing why he didn't get more reps, he didn't get more snaps, to just see what he can do. Even if he's not fully developed, I feel like he could have helped, but we'll see if he can get it going this offseason and make the roster.
And I think a cut for Boyd would be pretty disappointing for all of us. He was a guy that I actually scouted and mocked to the Saints quite a few times last year. I liked him. I think I had him around the 5th round or so because he's another guy who kind of slid a bit. But Boyd was a guy I liked, and just like Drew said, he was a good run defender throughout his college time, and the Saints severely struggled against the run, and it was frustrating to watch the Saints not give him a chance. With 5 wins on the year, give your young guys a chance to see what you got, and they never did. And now that he didn't get that chance, he could be somebody that it's just development. They may not see the development there. It's a whole new coaching regime, and just when that happens, guys like this end up getting cut. And I 100% agree with you, Nick. I don't think he even clears waivers. I think he's picked up the earliest he possibly could.
Yeah, I just think it's really telling that the Saints went out and traded for another defensive tackle and then went and selected one in the 3rd round. It's just, he's got his work cut out for him for sure.
Yeah, but with that being said, Caleb, who do you think would be the surprise cut on the year?
Yeah, this is. I got a lot of flack for this one when I had my early 53-man roster prediction, but I think JT Gray might get cut here. Obviously, Pro Bowl, All-Pro, special teams defender, has been amazing since being signed by the Saints. But I just think that this safety room is getting, or the special teams defensive backs are really good right now. Rico Payton, we talked about a podcast ago, that he's been so good at special teams, but also Jonas Sanker is the perfect player to have on special teams. Those two players chasing the return man is dangerous. JT Gray's spot might be up. And I think those two defenders, talking about Rico Payne and Jonas Sanker, have more flexibility on the defense itself. When JT Gray had to play safety last year, it wasn't good. And once that type of flexibility is taken away, I think the role on the defense and the role on the team kind of goes down a little bit. And I think just trying to go into a new era, trying to go with the younger players, I really think JT Gray's spot might be done.
Yeah, and like you said, it's definitely worth noting that he did struggle when being put out there at safety. You're not going to get much better than him as a captain, as a leader in that room, in the special teams room. He's familiar with Phil Galliano, but at the same time, like you said, a lot of these young defensive backs who are fighting for a roster spot are really putting it on the line. And look, the Saints also just went out and got Isaac Yiadom again, who had performed there for him very well, actually, next to JT Gray a couple of years ago. So I just don't know if Gray has the versatility to match up with these young rookie defensive backs, especially with, like you said, Rico Payton, who has just absolutely been a monster on that end. It's definitely going to be interesting to see because it would hurt a lot of Saints fans, but it might be something that's on the horizon for sure.
I 100% agree. I would be surprised if JT Gray is the cut. But the Saints do have a history of finding these guys who are aces at the special team spot. Chris Banjo a few years back, he was really good. Ended up getting him a good contract with the Jets. No, Justin Hardy got the contract with Jets. Chris Banjo went Cardinals. Yeah, but Justin Hardy is one of them as well. Another great player who ended up getting another contract and getting paid pretty well just for what he has done on special teams. So the Saints have been able to find those guys to do that for them. And maybe they think they have one in a room. Jonas Sanker is one that you named that when I covered him earlier in the draft, I was like, this is a guy who will see plenty of early time in special teams. He's fast, he can hit, and he doesn't have that bad of a tackling problem. He's a guy that will see the field early on special teams, and he could be pushing JT out. But like I said, I would be surprised if that move does actually take place.
Yeah, and I think that with when Jonas Sanker was drafted, I really just thought of it more of as a special teams role right away. But I honestly think Jonas Sanker can get on the field right away and still contribute on special teams. And I don't think that's something JT Gray can bring. Also, Jordan Howden role is also unknown right now. And I do think he's going to have a role on the defense, and that might not allow Jonas Sanker to have that early defensive plays on the field right away, which then muddies the waters for JT Gray's spot. And I just think Jonas Sinker's tackling is so good on special teams. It's something that right away when watching highlights when the Saints drafted him, because I wasn't knowledgeable on Jonas Sinker, but when I watched highlights after, it was something that jumped out right away. I didn't even have to watch defense. I'm like, oh, this guy's going to make a difference on special teams right away. So that's the moment I thought, okay, this could be the year that JT Gray gets released, and it's done there. But yeah, I'll be very surprised though.
All right. And with that, Drew, who do you think would be your surprise cut?
I'm going to the Jake Haener. I mean, this quarterback room, we've talked about it so much. It's just tough. He's not competing for the first 2 spots. Those are guaranteed. Shuck, Rattler. Don't know the order yet, but one of those 2. So it's really him against Hunter Deckers. But one of the main differences so far is that Hunter Deckers has been able to be on the field consistently. And when he has, he's played well. He's showing up for the team. I mean, he made the 3-point shot to give him the day off. Obviously making a wave there. While Jake Haener, you really haven't heard much. He had an oblique injury that caused him to miss a lot of time. So he's just kind of falling into an unknown land where not doing all too much, but he's still kind of just there. I don't know if that'll give him a roster spot. I just don't know. It's going to be a battle between him and Hunter Deckers. I just, for right now, see Hunter Deckers winning. The new regime, they went out and got Deckers as a UDFA. Jake Haener is still from the old. His time might be coming close.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Hunter Deckers showing out in 7-on-7s during minicamp really made that clear to me that this could be the end of the road for Jake Haener in a New Orleans Saints uniform, especially due to the fact that he had to miss so much time because it's in a quarterback competition like that, it's hard to catch up with just one day of practice. So he's got some catching up to do. And like I said, for Christian Boyd, he definitely has his work cut out for him.
And I like how you mentioned it. He was named, and I think this is significant. He was named as someone in that starting quarterback battle, and you knew the consensus there. Everybody knew it's not between Jake Haener. It never really was, but he was included in that. It may be significant that Kellen Moore did name Jake Haener as somebody in there, and maybe somebody that they want to keep, because if they do think he is somebody that's competing for a starting quarterback role, then it could be something like, well, why would we cut Haener for Deckers when they might be able to think they could get Deckers on practice squad or something like that. So as well, Jake Haener could be a cut candidate, and honestly, I believe he potentially is when it comes down to cut down day. To devil's advocate a little bit, the Saints did name him as somebody that is in that starting quarterback competition.
Yeah, that's a good point with the practice squad with Hunter Deckers, because I could easily see that happening, and that would be like the one way I see Jake Haener still on this roster. But I also think this coaching staff does really like Hunter Deckers, and they might not want to even risk that. Because if word gets out that Hunter Deckers did well in practice, it's a quarterback, any team is going to want to get that. So him being taken by a team and the Saints messing up, thinking he was going to be available to just be put on the practice squad, that's kind of a big risk if you're worried about that. I'm not as worried about that with Jake Haener, who, as Drew kind of talked about, that's the old coaching staff. The old coaching staff like that. And yeah, obviously it's the same scouting department. Mickey Loomis is still there, so they probably all still like Jake Haener. But this is a whole new coaching staff. Also, just want to make sure Hunter Deckers is lefty, right? Kellen Moore. Lefty legend Kellen Moore. The comparisons are there. So if Kellen Moore sees anything of himself in Hunter Deckers, that's a future coach right there. I just see I could see him still on the roster and just be that third option for potential future coach, just a smart player to have in the coaching room. I think it goes down to less about Jake Haener and more about the coaching staff and what they love with Hunter Deckers.
No, I think it is also important to note that Jake Haener, going into his 3rd year, is the most veteran quarterback out of the Saints QB room. Now, we all have heard Kellen Moore and the coaching staff say they think they don't need a veteran quarterback presence because there's enough experience between the coaches themselves to get these guys ready. But to have cut Jake Haener and your longest tenured quarterback is a 2-year quarterback, that could be a little worrying as well. Again, the Saints and Kellen Moore themselves have come out and said they're not too worried about experience because the experience that the coaching staff holds himself. But again, Jake Haener, if Jake Haener's cut, the longest pro would be a 2-year quarterback, and that's at least something funny to mention. But
Yeah, and if they're not real quick, if they're not worried about like the veteran leadership in the locker room, then I don't think it's an issue having all those young quarterbacks because also it's kind of one of those things that if a team isn't worried about the veteran leadership with just bringing in a veteran, they're more worried about if that backup quarterback veteran option could just come in and do what the offense needs to do if injuries occur. I don't think that's a worry with this current Saints roster because it's like if Tyler Shuck's not good, then nothing else matters if he is the starter. Same thing with Spencer Rattler, because I'm talking about nothing matters with just the quarterbacks, because that's then, oh no, we might need to pivot and draft another quarterback. It's not really, oh, we need to win games. That's kind of worst case scenario. So I think it's less about just having that veteran option to take over the offense and more, like you said, that veteran presence in the locker room. But if they think the coaching staff can do that, then I don't really see an issue with that.
And actually, now that you said that, and Drew said something similar too, Jake Hayner is one of the guys that we haven't actually seen take a leadership role or a to motivate his guys. We've seen Tyler Shuck already embrace the city on multiple podcasts, talk about the food, everything like that. Spencer Rattler was a guy that's always picking his guys up, helping, get them ready. And Hunter Deckers is the one that made that 3-point shot, gave the guys the day off, and guys seem to like him. We don't really see that too much with Jake Hayner, so I don't think he's a locker room problem at all, but it doesn't seem like he's a guy that locker room's always going to rally behind so far because he hasn't rallied behind his locker room from what we've seen. That is, to be fair, it's from what we've seen. But Jake Hayner, Tyler Shuck, and even Tyler Decker have had that had people behind them and going forwards. I haven't seen that with Jake Hayner. But to go into the final guy, it's actually who I believe is going to be our cut candidate. And I'll talk a little bit more on this. So I think I might keep this brief just because we have another segment later where I'll continue to talk about this. But it's Dallin Holker. He's been a fan favorite. A lot of people like him because the video of him catching the one-hand catch in the combine was pretty fun and everything like that. But he's actually a really big offensive threat. He's a guy that when he sees the field, I think he could take over a game from the tight end position. The problem is he hasn't really gotten his chance to do so. And last year he appeared in 12 games for the Saints. He had 3 receptions for 21 yards. The Saints haven't seen a lot out of him, and the tight end room is crowded. Right now the Saints have Jawan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Taysom Hill, Jack Stahl, Malachi Mataveo, still don't know if I'm saying that right, Trayton Welch, Michael Jacobson, and Holker. That's 9 tight ends in the tight end room. Obviously, not all those guys are going to cut it, but we talked about this a little bit earlier in a different podcast when talking about Jack Stahl. Kellen Moore is going to like his tight ends to block. Jack Stahl is a blocking tight end. He's doing really good, and I can't see Dallin Holker getting in over him, I'll be honest with you. And from what it seems, running a heavy run offense, not having a lot of production from Jack Stahl, from Dallin Holker, I don't see the Saints going ahead, and there's a lot of guys that I don't know if the Saints will put Dallin Holker over in the tight end room. He struggled blocking throughout college. He picked it up a little bit during the season, but he's not a prestige blocker. He's not a great blocker. He's just someone who kind of held his own during the end of the season, and I don't see him making the roster over some guys who can block, and they can also get 3 catches in a year, if I'm being honest. Now, I don't know if I will blame Holker for that. He has a skill set of like a wide receiver, just larger frame that pounds itself in a tight end room.
Yeah, I can definitely see Dallin Holker being a potential cut. He just can't happen to stay healthy. He kind of gives me Nick Saldiveri vibes, though Saldiveri was a 6th-round pick a couple of years ago. Those two just every time there's a competition at hand, they just seem to go down with something during training camp, mini camp, whatever it may be. And the thing with Holker is he's a receiving threat. Like he is such a good pass catcher. Was really dominant in his last season at Colorado State. Had a great game against Colorado and Travis Hunter. He's really always been that receiving threat, and if he can pick up blocking, like you said, Kyle, maybe that's his path to the roster. But right now, Michael Jacobson has been making plays after plays, year after year in offseason programs. I think he might finally get that shot with Foster Moreau still recovering from that leg injury, and like you said, Jack Stoll has also been killing it at minicamp this year. So he's somebody that I kind of see as a potential lock to make the roster, actually. But yeah, I could definitely see Dallin Holker being a surprise cut. I think he is cleared now and healthy and participating in everything after that foot injury that he suffered earlier in the offseason, but he's got to make the most of his opportunity now while it counts.
I also think it's a little redundant to have Dallin Holker and Juwan Johnson on the same roster because they're very similar players. I know Juwan Johnson went from wide receiver to tight end, but they are the main wide receiver threats and better in that area. So if you already have Juwan Johnson, and you have Jack Stoll, who's a great person to have with Juwan Johnson, you might not want to have Dallin Holker, who might not bring anything different, and also would probably be worse at this level right now than Juwan Johnson. So unless the coaching staff has just a plan for him and see a perfect vision, I could see him being cut definitely.
All right. Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I'm gonna actually talk on the tight end room and the tight end situation a little bit later in another segment that we have. So we're actually just gonna go right into our trivia now. Um, Now, to be fair for trivia this time, I don't think anyone's getting it.
Okay.
I don't think anyone's getting it, but I don't think it's that hard. It kind of, if you could, plug a few teams together, I think it's possible. But I don't think anyone's gonna be able to get it this time around. I'm not gonna give a position yet. Again, I'll tell you guys this later. And then I'll give you years though, just to make it a little. Again, don't think anyone's getting it right away. So he was with the Saints from 2010 to 2012. Jets from 2013 to 2015, Jaguars from 2016 to 2017, and finished his career with the Bills in 2018.
Interesting.
So Saints, then what? Jets.
Saints, Jets, Jags, and Bills. I'm pulled up. Saints, Jets, Jags, and Bills.
Uh,
And
Is
if
it
there's
Chris Ivory?
yeah, okay, Nick, you gotta
I
calm
was
down.
about to say
man.
that!
Nick, you
No!
have to calm down, man. You
I
can't.
was legitimately about to
Extra
say
good.
it. I'm
We're gonna
so
give
mad right
Nick
now.
a 2-minute cooldown next time, right? If he's
I
got it,
was-
he's got to say it.
like,
I didn't think anyone would get it. I probably should have held off on years a little bit. Saints Jets was the part where I'm like, everybody getting. I remember him on the Jaguars. I don't actually remember him on the Bills at all. I don't know if that's, but I remember him on the Jaguars a little bit. It was Saints Jets, and then I figured Jags might throw a few off. But I mean, I didn't even get a chance to go into like. You probably split
mad.
6 for 6 now.
I'm so mad because I was a second away from saying that.
I'm gonna need someone
My
else to
bad.
host it
Yeah,
next
it was
time.
when he
Next
was
week,
here.
I'm gonna need someone else to host it. I want to try to get in on this a little bit. I'm gonna have someone. Someone's gonna pick. You know what, Nick? You're gonna pick
Yeah,
it.
Nick, yeah, you
Nick,
host.
you're gonna pick
because
somebody.
yeah.
I want to be in this one next time. So
No one's gonna get it. That's the issue.
a lot harder than you think.
I'd love to see the pressure that this takes. It feels tough. I didn't think anyone from just teams. Well, I gave years too, but from just teams, I really didn't think anyone would get it right away.
I knew Saints, Jets, Jags. I didn't know Bills, so that's why I was like, "Oh, it's Chris Ivory," and then I was about to say it,
Because
but
I
no,
didn't even say
never
running
mind.
back. I didn't even say running back yet. I just said teams. All right, but that just sends us right into our next topic. And Nick, I guess you can start us off with it. Who is your most underrated player? So a player that the Saints fans or maybe even the Saints may be underrating going into next season, who will make a bigger impact than we expect.
Yeah, and like you just said, it's more or less of underrated than not getting the attention that I think the signing deserves. So I'm going to go look to 2014 first-round pick of the New Orleans Saints and wide receiver Brandon Cooks, who recently returned on a 2-year, $13 million deal, which I think is great value for a player of his stature. Actually, to put that into perspective, to comparing him to Patriots wide receiver Stephon Diggs, who recently just signed a huge deal. Both guys are 31, coming off of career lows in production, mostly due to injuries the past couple of years. Both have exactly 6 1,000-yard seasons, but one guy signed for $23 million a year and one guy signed for $6.5 million a year. Just to put into perspective the value that the Saints got Brandon Cooks at. While he did miss 7 games last season, he appeared in 17 games for Dallas in 2023, hauled in 60 of his 89 targets for 704 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. So if he can just put up anything close to those numbers, it could really lift some weight off of Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Cooks actually has been taking on a huge leadership role with the Saints as well. Actually flew out to Arizona to work with Spencer Rattler a couple of weeks ago. They plan on having another session, and Tyler Shuck also recently said that he planned to work out with the Saints receivers in Oregon and later in Dallas, both organized by Brandon Cooks. So it's clearly having an impact on the Saints' young quarterback room and the chemistry of the team already, which I think is significant considering how his first tenure in New Orleans ended. But it's also worth noting that Kellen Moore is clearly prioritizing speed over size with this wide receiver group, as mentioned throughout minicamp. So I expect Brandon Cooks to have a prominent role in this offense.
Yeah, and if you told me that he was being, or Brandon Cooks has become this leader role on the offense, I would have not believed that just because of how his time in New Orleans ended before. But it's amazing what he's doing so far, and I completely agree that even myself, I'm definitely underrating the addition of Brandon Cooks because we've talked about the wide receiver room how many times? Talked about how more pieces need to be out of this receiver room, and kind of in that kind of makes us underrate how good some of these players are right now. And Brandon Cooks is a perfect player to have with or for Chris Olave's development because I think Chris Olave could be an amazing slot receiver because the way he moves is just so fluid and he can get away from corners easily. Whoever covers him easily. And the other conversation is concussions. Brandon Cooks is known for dealing with concussions. And that's something that we've seen with Chris Olave. It's probably the biggest worry we all have with Chris Olave because of all the concussions he's been dealing with. So maybe having that leadership and teacher in almost a way, kind of telling him like, hey, this is how you avoid it. This is what you do if you're feeling this way, goes a long way for Chris Olave's career. So that's a really important aspect also.
I kind of love his role he's going to be in. We can all hope that Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave will stay healthy for the course of the season, but we have not been able to bet on that at all. So I think Brandon Cooks is going to have a huge opportunity to provide a lot of much needed help to that receiver room when they're both on and off the field. So I think it's just going to be such a good role for him. You love seeing him back. I don't think enough people have been talking about him.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for any defensive back room that has to cover these three wide receivers when healthy. I don't know how you keep up with any of them, and it's going to make the offense so dangerous. Obviously, we've talked about the lack of a contested catch threat, but when Brandon Cooks was signed, or it might have been before he was signed, it was released that Kellen Moore was looking for speedier receivers. That kind of surprised everyone because everyone's like, we already have two speedy receivers, but if it all works, Kellen Moore obviously has a plan, and if all these three wide receivers are healthy and that plan works, it could be very dangerous.
And I think it's so a lot of people actually were surprised because both you and Nick brought it up. The signing wasn't really appreciated at the time. People thought it was too much money, which is ridiculous. $6 million a year for a veteran presence who has 1,000 yard seasons is not overpayment. I know, especially when Jamar Chase is making $40 million a year. Things like this. It really puts into perspective. And like you said, Stephon Diggs $23 million a year. But people thought we have Brandon Cooks at home. We have Chris Olave. We have Rashid. We have the speedy guys. Wondering why are we picking up more speed when we need size? And yeah, you guys are right. It is a little surprising that we added another one. And how are you going to put all these guys on the field and you still don't have anyone to pick up that size problem that we have? And again, hate to say it, I'll get into the size in a second with who I'm taking as my underrated player of the year. But for what I see is there is an idea with this offense, the way this offense is built. A little surprising that they're going with less size on an offense that's clearly going to focus more on the run. But I don't hate the Brandon Cooks signing at all, and it feels like it's been over the past 5 years. Brandon Cook has been linked to the Saints every time. Sean Payton was here. Brandon Cooks was linked to the Saints. When it was Dennis Allen, Brandon Cooks has been linked to the Saints. It's just that homecoming felt like it was always going to happen. You kind of felt it with Tyrann Mathieu early in his career. I'm happy Brandon Cooks is back here. He's actually one of my oldest Saints jerseys I had as a kid. So it is awesome to see it come full circle, him be back on the Saints. And I really do hope he produces. I think a 600-yard season out of him is a success.
And real quick, I think another reason why the signing at the time was not looked at as the best is because Keenan Allen was still available and is still available because he is in my opinion, the perfect wide receiver to have with this offense. So perfect. He's already worked with rookies, is a contested catch threat, can dominate in the slot. So I think his availability kind of hurt the signing to begin with, and it's kind of not stained to the signing. Like I won't say it that way, but it kind of kept everyone's minds lower on Brandon Cooks since he's arrived, which might add to why everyone's underrating him.
Yeah, and Kellen Moore and Brandon Staley also both spent time with Keenan Allen in Los Angeles. But I do think the fact that Keenan is still yet to sign is telling of his injury history. And
I'm shocked about it. I'm shocked because I thought he was going to be. I mean, when I I don't know if it was after the draft or before the draft when the Saints were still wanting to sign a wide receiver or look at wide receivers. Keenan Allen was the name everyone talked about. It's kind of like Asante Samuel Jr. It just
Right.
makes so much sense for him to be on this roster. But also, as you said, injuries, age, price tag. There's a lot of things that go into it. So it might not be worth it, but still,
Worth looking into.
yeah.
All right, but with that being said, Caleb, who do you have as our breakout?
Yeah, my choice is Taliesin Fuaga. I think that people don't underrate him. I'll just say that right now. It's not really a sense of, oh, this, like, you don't look at the player and say, oh, people are underrating him. But I think just people don't understand how important Fuaga is to this team. He had an amazing rookie season. There were some lows, but on this injured offensive line, there was always going to be lows. He was dealing with a back injury all year, and he showed up. He played every game, right? I'm
Yes,
fairly
he did.
certain. Played every game, injured, definitely injured, and showed up. That is huge on a team that we have all seen dealt with injuries. Also, being able to switch sides to have your rookie tackle be in the best position to succeed right away is huge for this team. That's something if the Saints drafted a left tackle, put him at left tackle, and he wasn't able to move, we would be having a whole different conversation. And we would be worried about Kelvin Banks going into rookie year. I also think that Fuaga has all the ability in the world to step up and improve from last season and truly be the Ryan Ramczyk replacement. Replacing Ryan Ramczyk was a nightmare thought 5 years ago when he was healthy and the right tackle. But we are not worried about that right now. I think people aren't talking about that. We're not worried about it because we're not worried about it at all. And I think that causes us to underrate him a bit.
I can't wait
Yeah.
to see what Fuaga does this year. I mean, last year he played so well at a new position. He didn't play a single snap at left tackle in college. So now going back to the position he's played so much, I think he's going to be so good and be huge for this team.
That was kind of where I was going to go with it. I don't think people realize how good he was at right tackle in college either. If the Saints nail this right here and get both of their tackle tandem for the future, this could be huge for how the Saints can build their team moving forward. Like you said, 5 years ago, I would say 5 years ago, even when Teron Armstead was on the team, you would never think to be replacing those two guys, or at least not that they would have done it so soon. They really hit the jackpot in Fuaga, and I'm excited to see what he does in 2025 because, like you said, he allowed 0 sacks against the Dallas Cowboys with a back injury. That is unheard of for a rookie on a new position.
And I think we are sitting here talking like we have our tackles of the future, like it's set in stone, and that's 1 year after Taliesin Fuaga played, and Kelvin Banks hasn't even started a game yet. But there's a lot of confidence going into it, and when we talk about the offensive line, we don't talk about our right tackle, that our second year right tackle. We don't talk about our left tackle as guys that we're worried about. We're talking about our interior. And that kind of shows the confidence that we have, and it sounds like the Saints have as well in these guys. I definitely think people love Fuaga, but I think they need to love him a little bit more. Fuaga is one of my favorite players on the team right now. Watching his highlights coming out of college and the way he just puts guys on their back and his speed, everything about Fuaga, I love watching him. He's exciting to watch from the offensive line position, but he's also really good at what he does. So he brings production and talent to a offensive line that we were ferociously worried about a year ago. And now we're talking like we have our tackles of the future, and the only problem here is can Trevor Penning pick it up? So I love Fuaga as a player. I'm glad you brought him up because no matter how much fans actually like him, I still think he's one of the most underrated players on the Saints team.
Yeah, and going back to the draft process just before Fuaga was drafted, witnessing him go against Laiatu Latu in the Senior Bowl was some of the most fun I think I've ever watched in the draft process. It was just the best. It made me want the Saints to draft Fuaga and then trade up and then draft Latu because I know Latu didn't have the best rookie season, but they dominated against everyone else, but when they faced each other, no one won because it was just so good. And that's when I fell in love with Fuaga. And I just think that he might be the most, I know quarterback is going to always be the most important position, but Fuaga might be the most important player on this current roster.
And I going back to the draft process again, just because I like tooting my own horn about this. As the draft was coming up that year, 2 months before the draft, I tweeted, "I want the Saints to trade. I want Taliesin Fuanga, and I want the Saints to trade up to make sure they can get him." The Saints didn't have to trade up to get Fuanga, but that's how much of a player I liked. I liked watching his college tape. I really wanted Fuanga on the Saints. The Saints got him without having to give anything else up. So again, I love Fuanga as a player. I'm gonna say it a million times, just how much I think if you talk about untouchable Saints, he needs to be one of them. He can't be moved. He's secure. When you find your left, right tackle, whichever of the future, one of your tackles of the future, you keep him on the team. He is untouchable and very underappreciated from the league, if not from fans.
And every player in that.
I like how you mentioned the draft process, how the Saints didn't have to trade up to get him. I think they dodged a bullet. The Jets went with Olu Fashanu, whose career has not panned out so far, and the Steelers went with Troy Fautanu, which has not panned out so far. I think they really dodged a bullet there and probably chose the best offensive lineman in the draft, in my opinion.
And you have to remember that offensive line class was amazing. It was so good
So
because
good.
I'm forgetting the tackle the Titans drafted.
J.C. Latham.
Yeah, J.C. Latham, because J.C. Latham like rose above everyone besides Joe Alt, and then Joe Alt was not.
I don't know how.
Yeah, I didn't see that either. But Joe Alt was like the 6'7", just you're gonna get your star tackled right away. But everyone else, it was really like, what does your team want? And I don't know how people didn't draft Talisa Fuaga. If I'm doing a redraft right now of that draft, Fuaga's a top 5 pick. And Olu like was the one tackle that, in my opinion, I was like, okay, if he's with the Saints, I might draft him. But he's been dealing. I think he dealt with injuries, and it's the Jets the Jets offensive line. I think when he was playing, it was good, but also dealing with injuries right away, that's scary. So definitely dodged a bullet. I definitely agree with that.
There's also been rumblings of Fashanu changing positions, I believe, as well, along the Jets' offensive line. So that's something to keep an eye on as well.
All right, but yeah, to keep us going, because me and Drew do got to go to work in a little bit. So I know we love Fuaga. We could talk about him all day, but me and Drew got to get ready to go to work. So Drew, go ahead and tell us about your underrated player going in next year.
Nick was talking about Brandon Cooks as a free agent signing who hasn't been heard of much. I'm going with the draft pick that no one has talked about with Vernon Broughton. I'm not going to pretend that I was the biggest fan of that pick. I wasn't all on the Broughton hype train. I would have liked some other players. But the fact that the Saints spent 71st overall pick in the third round on him means that they like him, means that they see something in him. And with this defensive room, you were saying earlier, it's crowded, like Nick was saying with talk about his surprising cut. It's very crowded, but they don't have anyone to step up. I truly believe that Vernon Broughton will be able to do that. 6'5", 311 pounds, 39 tackles, 4 sacks last year. I think he's 100% going to have the chance. Now it's just if he can produce, I think he might be able to.
And to me,
Yeah,
and I was
I
in the
think
same.
Go ahead.
I'll start off. So to me, it's like what you said. He was a third round pick, 71st overall. That means something to me, at least. You know, Brandon Staley went out and he got a guy that he wanted. I mean, that's when they put a valuable third round draft pick, the Saints' third pick of the draft, and they went and got a guy that they wanted for his new scheme. As long as Staley here, Broughton's going to be probably end up being a staple of the Saints defense. A third round pick, especially 71st overall, is really valuable. So using that pick to get somebody who fans probably didn't know much about. I'll be honest, I didn't know too much about Broughton coming in. I had to do my research on him, and 4 sacks also seems enticing. It seems like something that's interesting. You see how much he could rush the passer and how much he can fit into this Brandon Staley defense.
And I think it's important. I think it's important that the Saints have added some coaches to the staff from Texas's staff from last year who has spent time with Vernon Broughton. They added Bo Davis as D-line coach, and they added Terry Joseph as defensive backs coach. And I know he won't be working with him, but those ties do mean something. And I feel like Broughton will have a role immediately, especially with how good he is at stopping the run, and that being one of the Saints' needed areas to address.
There's some plays on film with him of him stopping the run where he just bursts right through the line, one with quickness that you think, wow, this guy could really be something. It's just if he could put it together.
And I was in the same boat with Drew. That I really didn't know much about Vernon Bryan when he was drafted because he was kind of a late riser. Kind of showed up more on like if you looked at a mock draft simulator or mock draft, it would be like a later round, and then he just kept rising. So I wasn't as familiar, and there were definitely other players I probably would have rather drafted at that time. But that's kind of caused me for myself to underrate him and not really talk about him enough, just because I don't know as much about him. I don't know where his fit is, but it really goes down to Bo Davis chose his guy, and I'm gonna trust as an LSU fan. I'm gonna trust Bo Davis with the defensive tackles. That's whatever it is. So if he likes him, then I could easily see him having a good spot on this roster.
Yeah, and I think Broughton is one of the one guys that I think we all have. We mentioned it before that we underrated ourselves. So it's good to see that we finally got him on here to talk about him because out of all the Saints draft picks, other than tight end Malachi, and then again I don't even know how to say his last name fully. Other than him, Broughton may be the least talked about, and he's a third pick of the draft for us. But to go into my underrated player, underappreciated player going into the year, it kind of dawned on me because I saw a tweet, which is probably not the best way for this to go around. But the tweet came up and it said, "What if the big body receiver the Saints were looking for was Juwan Johnson?" And you know what? I was like, I 100% see it. Johnson had over 500 yards last year. He has shown that he can be the middle of the field threat. He is our vertical receiving threat from the tight end position. He has lined up in a slot before. He has played receiver. He can be that big body receiver that the Saints are looking for. We know Kellen Moore likes to use his tight ends. You could run your three wide. You can have Brandon Cooks, Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, and Juwan Johnson all on the field at once, and you're not lacking size there anymore because Juwan Johnson can be that receiving threat. He can take hits over the middle of the field. We've seen it before. He has the hands to make these passes. We've seen it time and time again, and he's always been a player that we looked at and we're like, how is he not producing better? He has the talent. It's there. He has shown a glimpse of promise before. He's getting up there a little bit in age now from, how many years we said this, but to me, him still getting that 3-year, $30 million deal, by the way, was very significant because that was under Kellen Moore. That was a Kellen Moore decision. So Kellen Moore has seemed to make a promise to Johnson to involve him into this offense, and the lack of concern about going get a big body receiver. They mentioned they want to get one before, but they haven't actually. And it's getting late into the season now, and they still haven't. It makes me think that Juwan Johnson will have a bigger role than a lot of us are expecting, and he will probably have a season where he produces some similar to last year, hopefully even better, and he could be a red zone threat that we've been waiting for.
Yeah, absolutely. And like where you kind of pointed to, you would expect him to produce a bit better. Juwan had a wild 2024 season. In the first 2 months of the season, he had just 184 total receiving yards. In the last 2 games of the season, he had 144 total receiving yards. So right now, it's not like you never know what you're going to get from Juwan, but those games that you do get the best out of him, he is extremely impactful for the offense. And like you said, they prioritize speed and versatility with their wide receiver room. So it makes all too much sense that Juwan Johnson would be that guy, especially because depending on who's at quarterback, if it is Tyler Shuck, they were roommates at Oregon where he was a wide receiver. So that connection's going to be there. And he has played with Shuck at wide receiver. So they know each other. I expect him to have a huge role. We've mentioned before on this podcast that when he was a free agent, Kellen Moore had like an hour-long talk with him about his role, what his role would be in this offense to try to persuade him to stay. That definitely means something because you're not just going to tell somebody that and obviously not have anything carved out for him. He's going to have a role in this offense, and he's the best tight end on this roster, no question about it.
And Kellen Moore loves to use tight ends in different ways, which is going to be very interesting and kind of be like what you talk about with him being the big body wide receiver. My main thing with Juwan Johnson is I just want to see red zone consistency, have him see a big red zone role because that Commanders game is still something that will always be in the back of my mind that he should have caught the touch. In the long run, great. We got Kelvin Banks. Wonderful. But in the short term, just that catch, Spencer Rattler might be the starter right now. It was a pretty big play that you never want to see. And Juwan Johnson has had drop issues before. He hasn't been consistent with that. So there's a lot of things he still needs to work on, but all the potential is there. I think everyone agrees that even at his age, there's potential there. But it's just everything needs to be put together, and his role needs to be really specific in this offense. And I think it can be.
You said that perfectly. If you want to see his potential, watch that Week 18 game against the Buccaneers last year. Some crazy plays. It's just, can he put it together? Which I feel like every single season we're always talking about Juwan Johnson. He's about to break out, about to break out, about to break out. See if this one can finally be the year that he does.
And I really hope it is, because you did just pay him $30 million. So you're paying him $30 million. It's a commitment. So Kellen Moore telling him himself, we're committed to making you a big part of this offense. Them showing him that by giving him $10 million over the next 3 years. That is a quite significant commitment. He's turning 29 in September. Johnson's a lot older than a lot of us actually think about. Hey, John Johnson's going to be turning 29, and when he finishes his contract with the Saints, he'll be 32. So it'll be a big commitment, but I really think he has the ability, he has the athletic ability, he has the size, and I know hands have been a question, but he's also showed us he has the hands at times to do it. And like you said earlier, Caleb, he just needs to be that red zone threat for the Saints. Because the Saints struggle so much in the red zone, significantly, and we have talked about it. They are going small ball with their wide receivers. So other than the running game being the main source of red zone, it seems like Juwan Johnson is going to be a guy who's going to have to catch a lot of touchdowns coming into the year.
He kind of needs to be that Jimmy Graham role. He needs to be the Jimmy Graham role, kind of, where it's just like, okay, no one else is open. I know the height difference, but no one else is open. Okay, Juwan Johnson's there. Young quarterback, easy security blanket in the end zone. And I think if he gets that, I'm okay with paying him what the Saints paid him.
Especially without Taysom Hill to bail you out in the red zone, you're going to need someone to step up.
All right, but with that being said, we appreciate everybody listening to the episode this week. We're sorry we couldn't get an episode out earlier last week. Time conflicts, time strains kind of mess it up, but we're hopefully going to make it up by nailing on time next week. But if you guys enjoyed, tune in to every Monday. Soon coming up, it'll be every Monday and Thursday with the season approaching quickly. But with that, see you guys later.